For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, you will see that we're in a different location. We're at the home of Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, and this is a very special interview with Paul Barber OBE. Paul's directly not in the fitness industry, but he's dealing with high performance athletes and people every single day.
My job is to make it as easy as possible for our teams to win football matches.
We delve into his routine, how he deals with the pressure of leading this football club.
Not getting any younger, so for me, running every day if I can, usually 5 times a week. For me, that's my mental switch off. I don't run with music, I don't run with another person, and that's just a little bit of time that I get to think about stuff in my life. And you know, this job is full on and you need something.
We talk things all failure and setbacks, and then how you can learn from Paul and implement this into your fitness business.
So not getting promoted in 2016 to the Premier League was a massive setback, but it built resilience in the organisation. It reinforced our desire to get to the Premier League. It made us more determined to get to the Premier League. And it forced all of us to look at what we could do differently and better. For me, that's a critical factor for success in any organisation.
Let's jump into the episode. Paul Barber OBE, thank you for joining us. I'd love to tap into your thoughts around leadership, being an elite CEO, high performance. But before I do that, there's some people most probably in the audience who are not fans of football. They most probably follow a different sport, and they're definitely interested in high performance. So can you just give everyone a brief sort of backstory on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in professional football now for 26 years. I failed as a footballer, failed pretty much as a coach really, but was lucky enough to sort of work in professional football, first of all with the England team, a couple of World Cups and a European Championship. And then with Tottenham Hotspur, which is a club I grew up supporting as a kid. And then I moved to Major League Soccer in North America. Was the first British executive to take a club there into the Major League. And then came back to Brighton 11 years ago, and with an aim of getting them into the Premier League first and foremost, and then keeping them in the Premier League. And now obviously with last season's performance, playing in European football for the first time in 122 years.
Which is a fantastic achievement, and everyone watching this knows that I'm a season ticket holder here and a big fan. So can you just tell everyone the day in the life? Does it change in the off season, which we are now, or is it different in the actual season?
Yeah, I think that the chief executive's job in a Premier League club really is, I summarise it best as saying my job is to make it as easy as possible for our teams to win football matches. So anything that I can do to help the coaching staff, the players win matches is really where my job starts and ends. And obviously there's a huge team of people around me that actually make those things happen, but it's my job to determine the strategy for how it should happen, and then make sure that the head coach has got all of the resources he needs, whether they're playing resources, medical resources, infrastructure, equipment, whatever it takes really to actually get the job done.
So 365 days a year you switched on, or is there downtime?
To be honest, it is a 365 day a year job, because you know, in the off season as we are now, there's a whole load of pitch work, maintenance work going on there. We're buying and selling players. We're thinking about work in the stadium. There's a brand new restaurant being built in the tunnel area. There's another one being built just below us over there. There's work going on the whole time, and of course you're also preparing for next season. So you're working on new contracts for staff, you're looking at pay and benefits, you're looking at all the things that go into running a normal business, and the football club in that sense is no different to any other business. We've got all the usual budgeting challenges and staffing challenges that any business has.
When the new manager came on board, Robert De Zerbi, you've talked in previous interviews about him painting the vision and then how it aligned with you and the club. Can you go way back to when you joined Brighton in 2012 and the vision that you had for the club, and then how that has come around and been achieved, and then the next steps?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about visions is that they're not cast in stone. You can update them, you can change them if you feel that the business is going off in a different direction. In our case, it's been a continuous line of progress, but not without bumps in the road. And our initial vision was to become a Premier League club. It was then to stay in the Premier League, and then it was to become, and still is, to be a top 10 Premier League club in the Premier League and a top 4 club in the Women's Super League. And we don't see visions as being achieved if you make that once or twice. You actually have to do it on a very consistent basis. And by that, I mean 6, 7 times out of 10 in order to say that your vision is broadly achieved. And even then, depending on the market, depending on the circumstances you're facing, you may not update it. You may not even take it on from there. And for a club of our size to be very regularly in the top 10 in the Premier League and the top 4 in the Women's Super League would be quite something, bearing in mind that the vast majority of our history has been in the bottom 2 divisions in the English football pyramid. So from our point of view, that vision is stretching. It's something we unite behind. And when we achieve it, it feels really good.
One of the biggest problems that we see is businesses stagnate. And that might be because the business owner who's running the business day to day, they're getting fatigued, their vision is pulled back because of setbacks. So how often are you sitting down with Tony Bloom, the chairman of the club, and thinking about the next steps? How far in advance are you planning?
Well, we talk probably every day, sometimes several times a day. So what are we now? It's 11:30 and we've spoken 3 times this morning already. But we always formally get ourselves away for a couple of days, away from the stadium, away from the training ground, where we can genuinely think about the future. What does the future look like? What do we need to do to support the vision that we've still got in place? Are there any changes we need to make to staff, the way we operate, the infrastructure of the business? And that's something that we do religiously every year. So as soon as the season ends, usually within 7 days, we take ourselves to an off-site meeting with our directors, and we debate the club and the future of the club at that meeting. Once that's done, that then filters into our planning with our executive team, the guys that effectively run the club day to day. And then from there, we build our budgets. And, that's a process that we take very seriously. And there's a lot of people that think football clubs are not like normal businesses. They are. They have to do all the things that normal businesses do. It's just that so much of what we do is in the glare of a lot of media publicity, a lot of scrutiny, and that sometimes means it looks like we're different to other businesses, but fundamentally, we're exactly the same.
How much risk have you taken in your personal career, and then as a club, they've taken steps prior to you coming on board in 2012, and even now, how much risk is involved?
Yeah, I think in terms of personal risk, I think every time you change jobs, you're taking something of a personal risk. I was at Tottenham Hotspur, the club I supported as a kid. I was very comfortable there, but took a personal risk to go and live and work in North America because I thought it would stretch me, develop me, make me a better CEO, and I'm glad I did, because I think that experience in a different part of the world with different challenges helped me to grow as a chief executive. The club took a huge risk building the stadium. At the time, we were attracting crowds of 6,000 or 7,000 at Withdean, and this stadium was initially built to 22,000, and people thought we were crazy to try and build a stadium that was 3 times the size of the average crowd that we were getting at that time. Here we are now, 10, 11 years later, and it's 50% bigger again, and we're looking at how we can put more seats in to take us above 34,000. So, things change, and, risk-taking is all part of business change and business development, and it's something you have to obviously weigh up, calculate, make sure that that there are reasonable parameters to the risks that you're taking. But businesses don't grow without a degree of risk-taking. People don't grow without a degree of risk-taking. So I am a believer in calculated risks.
Yeah, we always tell people, step outside your comfort zone, take that risk back yourself. I want to switch now to staffing. So one of the biggest problems that many of our members face is they start off on their own with a passion for fitness, and then they move into that business role, and then suddenly they can't spin all the plates, so they take on some staff. Now, some of our members have 20 plus staff, others it's just themselves, but they want to take on that first 1 or 2 staff members. With your hiring process here at the club, can you just talk us through that? I guess you're not involved with every single hire, but maybe the first question is, how many people are in the team, like day-to-day operations?
There's about 350 full-time staff here, and on a match day it would get up to nearly 1,000. So that's not including our playing staff. And from that point of view, that's a lot of responsibility. I think when you take on staff, whether it's 1 or 300, it's a big responsibility. And I feel that every day. The decisions that we make, will ultimately decide whether someone's mortgage gets paid or their kids' school fees get paid or the ability to buy a new car or whatever it happens to be, whatever's going on in their lives, just normal day-to-day bills. So we've got to get more decisions right than wrong, because we've got to make sure the club is profitable and sustainable for the future. So for me, staffing decisions are critical. We recruit according to our values. We're a very values-based organisation. We have very clear articulated values, and the people that we bring into the club, we want to meet those values. They're not rocket science, acting with integrity, aiming high, exceeding expectations. They're all the sorts of things that busy, successful people strive to do. But we make sure that when we're hiring people, we identify those sort of attributes, those qualities, those sort of leadership techniques. And if we don't see them, or if we hire someone who then doesn't demonstrate them, then either that person doesn't get hired or doesn't stay with us very long. Because what you can't afford is for the culture of the club to be undermined just because you've made one or two bad recruitment decisions. It's better to bite the bullet early, make a change, and bring in the person that will actually do the job better.
Those values, are they published anywhere on the
Yeah, we're
website?
very open about them, and one of the first things we look for when we're hiring people is, have they bothered to try and find out what kind of culture we've got, what kind of people we are, the way we operate, and if people haven't done that basic level of work, then they're probably not going to get through the interview process anyway. And equally, you can't really cheat. I think when you talk to people, our HR staff have got a number of questions that are designed to see whether the person who may know the values is prepared to live the values. And we can usually tell within the first 15, 20 minutes of an interview whether that's going to be the case. But it doesn't mean that they're the only values we abide by or live by, but they're certainly core to the way we operate.
In previous interviews, I heard on High Performance, you talked about the appraisal system. And if a staff member is not aligning, you try and give instant feedback. Can you give some sort of insight into that?
Yeah, I'm not a great believer in waiting for a year to tell someone they're either doing a good job or a bad job. I think that's a pretty destructive process if you think about it, particularly with 300 people. If you've got 300 people underperforming and you wait 12 months to tell them, your business is going to be in a bad shape at the end of that 12 months. So we try and provide continuous feedback. A lot of it will be informal, telling someone they're doing well doesn't cost anything. Telling someone they need to improve equally doesn't cost anything. It might be a bit more of a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation we expect our managers to have. And also I think there's a degree of self-policing. I think people know when others are not pulling their weight. And I think from that point of view, there's a bit of nudging and come on, you need to dig in here and help us. And what we try to encourage as much as we can is that one team might be having a good time and therefore work is right up to date and they're flying, and another team may be suffering a bit. So what kind of help can you be to that other team? And sometimes one of our values is treat people well. Sometimes it's just about looking in on someone if they're having a hard time and seeing if you can help. And that's just treating people well. It's not rocket science, but sometimes if someone's at a low ebb, that can make a huge difference to their day, their week, their month, their year even. So again, all of these things are not difficult, but they require people to actually have them inside them in order to live them naturally, not for it not to be forced. I don't want people walking around chanting a mantra like some kind of cult, but I do want them to understand the way our culture works and how we expect them to behave.
One thing I'd definitely take away from that is all of our members and even us as a company having our values, across that whole team, so they understand what we stand for, and our members, should definitely do the same. On the hard conversations part, so our members, they will, from personal training background, they like coaching people, they take on that team member, and they just want to help people. And sometimes you've got that ingrained in your DNA. It's hard to have those hard conversations, and they leave it and they leave it and leave it, and it just builds and builds and builds until it becomes a massive problem. And one example is, a personal trainer may have a team, and then one of those staff members starts to break away, and then suddenly overnight they become a direct competitor, where that could have been nipped in the bud, and if that person was given proper career progression. So when you've had hard conversations in the past, is there a way that you frame it, sort of the feedback that you give?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wasn't great at having those conversations either. Earlier in my career, certainly as a young manager, they were the conversations that I would put off. Because at the end of the day, I'm a people person. I like working and being around people, a team player. So having a difficult conversation with someone that you have on your team or want on your team is always going to be challenging. But what I learned later was that if underperformance isn't addressed and isn't addressed quickly properly, then actually what it does is it undermines the performance of the whole team and the whole organisation ultimately. And so being a manager, being a leader, being a business owner sometimes means you've got to do the difficult stuff and you've got to do it properly and you've got to do it quickly. But sitting down with someone and saying, look, this is what I expected of you. Is that reasonable? You know, is that your understanding of what my expectation was? Yes. Okay, so this is how it's working. As you can see, there's a gap. What do you feel about the gap? What are the reasons for there being a gap? And almost get people to open up a little bit. You know, very often you'll find out that they were struggling with something at home, or they've got some financial worries, or the rest of the business isn't working as well as they'd hoped. Okay, what could I have done to help you? Why didn't you talk to me about that? And then usually people are in a position where they immediately sort of almost hold their hands up, and the confrontation goes away. You don't need to confront someone once they've accepted that there's a gap in their performance. And then it's about how big is that gap? Can it be addressed? Are we going to work on this together to get you back up to the level? And if people have got a willingness and a positive attitude towards that, I'm more likely to give someone the chance to show me what they can do. If that gap is too big, or there is no willingness to address it, or they don't think it can, then at that point you've got a more difficult conversation. But at least you've got them to a point where they know why. It's not some big secret. For me, if there is a big gap, there's also a management failure. Because as I said before, if you've waited 12 months to have that conversation, or even 6 or 3 months, and the gap's so big, then you probably have got some fault of your own to take and some blame to take, because you should have closed the gap earlier.
Failure. Can we just talk about that, either in your career or as a club? There's been many setbacks. I think anyone who's in an elite position, be it sport or business, is part of the game. What's sort of your mindset around that?
Well, for me, setbacks build resilience, and every organisation, whether it's sporting or non-sporting, needs to have resilience in it in order to succeed. So for me, every setback that we've had, and there've been several at certain times, then we've tried to understand why we suffered the setback. Was it something we controlled? Was it something out of our control? And then what could we do differently to maybe avoid the setback? And then what kind of learnings are there for all of us that then helps you build the resilience? So not getting promoted in 2016 to the Premier League was a massive setback, but it built resilience in the organisation. It reinforced our desire to get to the Premier League. It made us more determined to get to the Premier League, and it forced all of us to look at what we could do differently and better. The following year, we got to the Premier League. So we did it with a degree of resilience built in that wouldn't have been there if we'd have got through to the Premier League in 2016. So there's a positive in that, and you can actually build on that as you go through, particularly as an elite football club. There will always be teams better than you. There will always be results that go against you. There'll always be performances that are below par. There will always be individuals that, for whatever reason, don't play to the level you expected them to play at. Each one of those situations helps build resilience. And for me, that's a critical factor for success in any organisation. Your ability to overcome setbacks is critical.
Let's talk about yourself, your personal routine. What do you do for workouts, your nutrition, your sleeping habits? How do you deal with the stress of running, a football club?
Well, first of all, I've got a son that works in the fitness industry. So from that point of view, I'm under a certain amount of pressure. Even if he doesn't apply it, I feel it myself to do something. Not getting any younger. So for me, running every day, if I can, usually 5 times a week, is an important part of my routine. Sometimes it may only be 30 minutes. Sometimes it might be 60 minutes. Doing little bits and pieces in the gym these days is about as far as I would go in terms of doing stuff inside. But for me, that's my mental switch off. I don't run with music. I don't run with another person. I go my own pace. I'm up against my watch most of the time. And that's just a little bit of time that I get to think about stuff in my life. And, this job is full on and you need something. And it also forces me out into fresh air, which is important as well, because I think in this job you can very easily get stuck in an office every day, all day. So I enjoy that. I've been doing that since I stopped playing football at 35, and here I am now, quite a few years later, still doing it.
In the morning, lunchtime?
Always
evening?
In the morning. I find it really difficult to motivate myself to break my working rhythm. And then usually by the time I get home, it's too late to sort of, again, get that, summon that energy. Might have been different 20, 30 years ago, but these days, up early, get it done, back into the office.
Yeah. Nutrition, anything you do specifically around that?
I think here we're very lucky because as part of the football club, we provide breakfast and lunch for everyone. It's healthy, it's available to everyone, free of charge every day. So that forces you into a relatively healthy diet. Like anyone else, I cheat sometimes, a lot of the time sometimes. But no, I try and get a balance. And again, like anything else, the older you get, the less physical activity you're doing, the more you are behind a desk, the more you've got to watch that calorie intake and the balance.
And sleep, do you track it? And I'm sure you're getting calls, midnight, different time zones, a deal needs to go through.
I don't track it, but I've always been lucky that I can pretty much work on 5-6 hours, very rarely more than that. So I'm pretty late to bed and I'm up early. So from that point of view, I guess that's lucky. You've either got that or you haven't. But I've never been one to lie in, even when I was younger. So from that point of view, getting up early is not a problem for me.
Many of our members and people in the fitness industry, they might get criticism either from people who are the closest to them, and they're doing it from a place of love and kindness, and they may be doubting their dreams and aspirations to open a gym or continue running a gym, or they might get criticism from like a customer or client where something didn't go to plan. You're dealing, I guess, with criticism from major outlets, every single day. How do you deal with that as an individual and then as a club?
Well, first of all, I mean, the scrutiny that the football industry is under, if you couldn't live with criticism, you probably wouldn't be in it, because everybody's got an opinion on what we do. Everyone's got an opinion on what the coach does, the players do, what I do, the decisions we make. So you have to develop a thick skin. You have to block out the noise. And we talk a lot in this club about the noise that goes on around football. If you listen to all of it, you'd be flip-flopping. You'd be doing this, you'd be doing that, you'd be doing different things. And almost always it will be against the strategy that you've put in place, and sometimes perhaps even against the values. So we shut out the noise as much as we can. We develop a thick skin. We don't react to every comment, opinion. We try and avoid social media as a guide for how we're doing, because it tends to be full of extremes, either extreme positive or extreme negative. So we try and avoid that, but we also try and support each other. As I said before, there will be times when certain players are having a difficult time. Their teammates want them to do well, even though it's competitive. There's 25 players in a squad. There's 11 places on the pitch to start a game. They still want everybody to be doing well. So that sort of support from colleagues, whether you're on the field or off the field, is important. Thick skin's important. Shutting out the noise is important. Believing in yourself is important. If you've got a strategy that you believe is the right one, and a product that you believe is a good one, and a way of working that you believe suits your business and how you intend to grow your business, then don't deviate from it. Don't listen to people that may have a different approach. Doesn't mean to say they're wrong and you're right. It just means that what you believe in should be something that you pursue. And I'm a great believer that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And in that sense, the luckier you get, usually things start to come off for you. That increases your confidence, that increases your self-belief, that improves, if you're in a business situation, usually your profitability. So for me, there's a lot of stuff that comes from in here and in here that you have to reconcile in order to be successful. And part of that goes back to what I said before about resilience, and you've got to be personally resilient as well. But a lot of it is self-belief ultimately.
In your career, have you had anyone mentor you, or anyone who consistently gives you advice, or anyone you look up to?
Yeah, a lot. Even now, as old as I am, and as long as I've been doing this, I have someone that I talk to regularly to sometimes just sense check something I'm about to do, or maybe I've given a big interview. I did a high performance podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it's been fascinating to see the volume of feedback from that. I hadn't appreciated quite how far and wide that particular podcast went, but actually people that you don't know from different parts of the world giving you really direct feedback and questioning some of the things you've said in mainly positive ways is really useful as well, because then you kind of you kind of go back and sort of recheck some of the things that you've said, and did I mean to say it quite like that, and did I not express it in quite the right way, or whatever it happens to be. But that constant process of being prepared to learn and to develop yourself, I think, is really important.
You touched upon it earlier. the importance of focus. So a lot of people in the fitness industry, like from 6 a.m. till 9, they're training people, and then they have to do some admin, then they've got to do some sales calls. You must be pulled in a million different directions. Like, what would be your advice on focus?
Again, I try and have a little plan for myself every day. On the run that I talked about, I try and think about what the day is going to be and how I'm going to divide up what I've got to do. And then once I've got that plan, I try not to let anything distract me. It's so easy to be distracted, and particularly for things you'd rather be doing. If someone gives you the opportunity to do something you like doing, then you usually stop doing the thing you don't like doing. That usually creates a backlog. So I try and avoid that. Try and just be as organised as I can. I like to be accessible, so I don't tend to close my door too much. People will wander in. That is good and bad. It's good because I keep a temperature check on the business. It's bad because it can set my diary back. And I try not to overload the diary, from a logistics point of view. Booking a meeting in London at 8 o'clock and one back in Brighton at 10 o'clock isn't smart. You're going to, sooner or later, you're going to have a problem with the train or the car, or just, end up killing yourself. So I try and have a diary that's reasonable to deliver against. And, from that point of view, I rely on, my PA and a lot of other staff around me. But I know not everyone's got that luxury. So I still try and do as much of it for myself as I can, because that way, if it goes wrong, I'm to blame ultimately.
Last question for everyone watching this. What would be sort of your final thoughts, piece of advice to them to continue on the journey as a CEO in their fitness business, to maximise the success they've already had, to continue building on that?
Well, I think having a clear vision, clear values is an important foundation. Being prepared to learn along the way and develop along the way, both personally and the staff around you. But ultimately just having that self-belief and resilience that what you're doing is right for you, is good for you, is good for other people, and accepting that the resilience will actually help you get over the bumps in the road. And there's no business that I know, or no business that I've run, particularly in the sports area, where there aren't setbacks and there aren't bumps in the road. So you've got to just build them into your thinking and build them into your planning.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
No problem.
That was the Paul Barber interview. Many great takeaways for me. It was the values and then how to hire around those values. I'd love to know your thoughts, so please share. And if you haven't, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you're listening.